Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Just wanted to record a real quick thought before Shabbat. I actually thought about this last week, but I didn't have time. It's really based on Parashat Bereishit, but I think it's very relevant for all Shabbats. And I was discussing it while learning with my Rosh Yeshiva this morning, my rabbi, and he liked it really well, and he said he's going to give it over at his Shabbat table. So I was learning the Ben Ish Chai last week, Rav Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. He was a very, very big tzaddik in Baghdad in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and he wrote a sefer called Ben Ish Chai. And in the Ben Ish Chai, this is a picture of him right here. And in the Ben Ish Chai, he brings different drashot, like talks that he does that he would give every week in the synagogue, and he also brings halakha, like Jewish law, so that you can learn how to act and conduct yourself. So, he did it for each section of the Torah, each parasha, over the space of 2 years. So, in the second section on Parashat Bereishit, so this was the very beginning of the Torah, he talks about the case of Adam and Chava and eating the fruit in the tree in the Garden of Eden. And for those who don't know, the Mekubalim, the Jewish mystics, they say that this is one of the foundational defects in the world was because Adam and Chava ate this fruit, and when they were told not to, Hashem gave them the Garden of Eden. He said, you can eat all the plants here, except don't eat the Eitz Chaim and don't eat the Eitz Adat Tov Ra, meaning don't eat from the tree of life and don't eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or good and bad, literally. And but Adam and Chava ate it anyways. They were tricked into it by the snake, and they were cast out of the garden. And when we traditionally, not now, there are many Jews who have taken this term differently nowadays, but traditionally Tikkun Olam was about trying to elevate the world to that spiritual level that we used to have when we were in the garden. So, and to take it a little further, all the problems that the Jewish people are having nowadays in Galut, in exile, is because we still haven't fixed this issue. And I saw this, and I realized we're in a war here in Israel. And every war is a spiritual war. I was reading something from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe this week, and he was talking about World War II, 1943, and he was talking about how that was primarily a spiritual war, even though it seemed like it was a conflict between all the nations. He said that was primarily a spiritual war. So for sure, nowadays when Jews are being attacked in Eretz Yisrael, in our own land, it's also a spiritual war. And one of the best ways that we can fix this is to help speeding up the Tikkun Olam, and that will bring Mashiach, right? So, and I think this, in particular, the Ben Ish Chai brings ways to fix that. And I think it's very, very beautiful because it gives something that every Jew can do on Friday in a very simple way. Don't even have to be Orthodox. You just have to enjoy food and wine. So let's get into this. So it says, Vatera ha'isha ki tov ha'etz l'ma'achal. So the woman saw how good the tree or the fruit was to eat. V'chi taiva hu la'enayim, and her eyes desired it. V'nachmad ha'etz la'askil v'tikach miprio v'tochal. She took it, I'm paraphrasing here, but she took the fruit and she ate it. Right? Now the Ben Ish Chai says, so that's from Bereishit in Perek Gimel Pasuk Vav. So he says, the Ben Ish Chai says, Hine Rabbeinu Zichron Lebracha Amru. So our sages, blessed memory, said in Masechet Berachot in the Talmud, they said, Eitz Shachal Adam Harishon. It says that the tree or the fruit that he ate was actually Hita Haya. It was wheat. Od Amru. They also said Geffen Haya. It was grapes. Od Amru. Others said Te'ena Haya. It was figs. And they bring different pasukim, why this is. They bring a pasuk for grapes based on the idea that you drink and got drunk, like in Noach, which is this week's parsha. They bring te'anah, figs, because when they saw they were naked, they sewed fig leaves together. And then they brought chita, they brought wheat, because it says a child doesn't know how to talk until they're old enough to actually eat food from wheat. And just like we couldn't call out to, it says you couldn't call out to his father and mother, so it's the same idea. We couldn't call out to Hashem until we were able to eat wheat. He says, Be'emet, he says, in truth, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim Chaim. These are all words of the living God, meaning they're all true. So what does that mean? What do you mean? How is the fruit three things at once? especially three very different things. Dechulu itanu. Ki eitz hadat haya bo pri tam hita upri tam teina upri tam gefen. He says because the eitz hadat, this tree or this fruit from the knowledge of good and evil, had the taste of wheat, and it had the taste of fig, and it had the taste of geffen all the time. And he says, don't be confused by this, because he says it's also known that the manna that used to fall in the midbar for all the Jews could taste anything at once, right? Like one person could say it tastes like pizza, one person could say it tastes like steak, and some people could mix flavors, right? It could taste as everything all at once. So because it's not, so don't be bewildered by the fact that this is tasting like three different things all at the same time. And he says, because our rabbi's blessed memory said, Olam, referring to the man. The haya, the eitz hadat perot, mishlosha minim, elu shehem, rashi tevot, hagat. So he says, these three things are rashi tevot, hagat. Now, what is rashi tevot, hagat? Rashi tevot is a fancy way of saying the first letter of each word. And Chagat is a Kabbalistic term meaning Chachma, Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet, which is like inside a person. But all of these things, we can get into the Kabbalistic tree of life at some point. And actually, we probably should right now. You have Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, and then you have Malchut at the bottom. Those are the 7 lower Sfirot of the 10 Sfirot. And they're emotional attributes, but they all get their power, so to speak, from the part above it, which is dat. So now this is very beautiful, by the way. You see that the eitz hadat tov ra is called eitz hadat, and in the tree of life, it's dat that then feeds into chesed, gevurah, and tiferet. Now that just got super Kabbalistic and very mystical. But the idea is that this dot now was destroyed, and we're trying to pick that up and repair that dot, and that's the Tikkun Olam that we're discussing. So he now goes into, the Ben Ish Chai is going to go into a bunch of discussions about how to prove that it's Hagat. I don't want to go there. I think it's going to confuse everyone. What I thought was very beautiful, that I think is very applicable to everyone, is if you skip ahead to the next paragraph, he says, "V'lachein ba'eitcha nachnu nichnasim l'Shabbat." And he says, and therefore, at the time that you enter into Shabbat, na'aseh kiddushat haShabbat b'shalosha devarim. You do 3 things for Kiddushat Shabbat, right? He says, L'takein kilkul eitz hadat. In order to fix this spoilage, this destruction of the eitz hadat, shena'aseh samuch le'nichnasat Shabbat. Shahaya besof yom shishit, and you do them at the end of the 3rd day. Shekavar chitchila tosefet Shabbat lehikanes, right, where you're able to extend Shabbat into the 6th day and add to it a little bit. V'hainu shenaseh kiddush shel Shabbat beniknaso b'yain lechem v'ner. And he says that you should make kiddush of Shabbat, or you should add holiness to Shabbat, by doing this, by when he enters into it, by yain, lechem, and ner. So what does this mean? So he says you have 3 things. You have lechem, which is like the challah, right, the meal itself. You have yain, which is making kiddush, when you sanctify the day on wine in the Kiddush cup. And then you have ner, when you light Shabbat candles. And he says these 3 things all connect and fix those 3 parts that we mentioned earlier, when it says the woman saw the fruit, she desired the fruit, and then she ate the fruit. Right? So, let's see. We see here, he says, V'hainu lechem tikkun shel v'tirei, right? The lechem, the bread, is to fix, to mitakein, the fact that she saw. V'ner tikkun shel v'chi ta'avahu le'enaim. The candles which are connected to your sight are because she is going to fix your desire through your sight, and candles obviously illuminate your eyes, so they're connected to the idea of sight. And then he says, lastly, Kiddush is tikkun shel v'nachmat ha'etz lahaskil, right? Because your I don't know how to translate this properly, but really he's saying that wine is a positive byproduct actually, of the kind of decomposition of the grapes. But it's really to fix the mind, right? So what does this mean? This means, practically speaking, when we enter into Shabbat, we have three things. We have challah, we have a meal. We have candles, and we have wine. We have Kiddush. And these are things that everyone can do. For example, if you're making challah before Shabbat, you should have in mind when you're making challah and making the blessing that you're actually fixing and repairing this part of the sin. And when you're lighting candles, you should also, or if you're looking at candles, the women have the job of lighting the candles, but the man, when he's making Kiddush, he should be looking at the candles. You should also be having this idea that you're fixing this part of the sin, of the desiring of the fruit. And lastly, when you're making Kiddush itself, the whole idea is that had Adam and Chava waited until the very, right before Shabbat, they could have taken the Eitz Hadat and they could have turned it into wine, and then they would have made Kiddush on the very first Shabbat, and it would have been fine. Because we say, when we make Kiddush, we say L'chaim, which means to life, and instead of being Eitz Hadat that leads to death, it now would turn to life. So, there's a big idea that in Judaism, that everything we do, every mitzvah, fixes problems that have happened before, whether it's through our own sins or through the sins of other people. And even if you don't have deep mystical intentions while you're doing it, it still has a huge impact if you just have even the most simple intention while you're doing it. So tonight, when you're keeping Shabbat and you light Shabbat candles, have in mind that you're fixing this desire of the eyes that Adam and Chava had for the fruit. And then when you're eating the bread, you should have in mind that you're fixing the seeing of the fruit in the first place. And lastly, when you make Kiddush, remember that you're actually turning it from death, because it says when we ate the Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, that death came into the world, we were kicked out of Gan Eden, and we're doing it L'chaim, right? We say Savri Maranan L'chaim, and then we make a bracha, we make a blessing. So it says that we're taking it from death and we're turning it to life, and we're doing that also to fix what Adam and Chava screwed up. And all of these things are ultimately going to do little bits. Every Shabbat, they're going to fix more and more and more until eventually, spiritually speaking, this defect that's in the world is fixed, and it's going to help us bring the Geulah, and it's going to help us stop this war. So I encourage every one of you, whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, whether you're Orthodox, not Orthodox, tonight, sit down and have a meal with your family. Make Kiddush, eat challah, light Shabbat candles, and have in mind these three things, and try to do that every week. You don't have to keep all of Shabbat if you don't already do Shabbat, but even just do this. And even if you say, I'm not a religious guy, I'm going to tell you, it's good to sit down with your family and have a meal, especially every week, especially on Fridays. But I really hope that people really take this to heart, and they, whether you've been doing Shabbat for many years, you've never done Shabbat before at all, that you really are able to implement it in your own life, and that you find meaning in it, and that it helps you feel like you're contributing to bringing peace to the land of Israel and to all the people of Israel. So may Kadosh Baruch Hu bring peace to everyone living here in Israel. May He protect Jews everywhere in the world, and may He bring peace just to the entire world, not just the Jews. But that's only going to come when we finally fix this sin that happened in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, and we bring the Geulah and Mashiach Kenu. So Shabbat Shalom and all the best.